I'm Teresa Martinez. I'm the Executive Director of the Continental Divide Trail Coalition based here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I am a proud and privileged member of the Outdoor Futures Initiative, where our future is the vision of a national fund for underserved tribal, urban, rural, and rural equity for those underrepresented youth out there. And today we are joined by three amazing speakers to help us learn how to support outdoor equity funds. And I just wanted to share a little bit about the Outdoor Futures Initiative, which is that, we are hoping to create a national outdoor equity fund that supports all youth across the country, from urban and rural communities, tribal nations, to get outdoors and support community level initiatives that serve underrepresented communities so that they have access to the resources they need to ensure outdoor experiences are positive ones and encouraging ones, and support future adventures and support strengthening and expanding their peer networks to keep young people outdoors having a great time in the places that we live and love. And we are speaking with three leaders from three of the existing state-based outdoor equity fund programs in New Mexico, Colorado, and California that currently exist to gain insights and inspiration for this national initiative and the many state-based initiatives that are currently happening across the country. We have the director of the New Mexico Outdoor Recreation Division, Karina Armijo, who is the director of the first Outdoor Equity Fund program across the U.S. We have Andrea Kurth, who is the Outdoor Equity Grant Program Manager for the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, who administer the Colorado Outdoor Equity Fund, and Armando Quintera, who is the director of the California Department of Parks and Recreation and leads the implementation of the California Outdoor Equity Fund. We are so happy to have everybody with us. And with that, maybe we can move to having our speakers just say hi real quick, and then we'll jump right into the questions. And while we're here and you're joining us, we'd love for you to let us know who you are, where you're calling in from, and your pronouns in the chat. So hopefully, Laura, you can switch the slides, or I'm sure people can see each other. I'm not sure. We're getting there. All right, well, I'm going to ask Karina to maybe just real quickly introduce herself and where she's calling in from.
Sure. Hi, my name is Karina Armijo, pronouns she and her. I've been serving as the director of Outdoor Rec Division for the state of New Mexico for the past 8 months. I was originally born in Honduras and raised in Ohio, and I eventually found my way to northern New Mexico, in Taos right now, where I've been a resident for about 28 years. And throughout my career, I've dedicated myself to supporting small businesses through marketing services and graphic design. And most recently, I served as tourism and marketing director at the town of Taos for 8 years. And I'm incredibly thankful for the opportunity to speak on this panel today and look forward to sharing my experiences and insights with all of you. Thank you.
Great. And how about we hear from Andrea Kurth?
Hey everyone, I'm Andrea Kurth. As Teresa said, I manage the Outdoor Equity Grant Program in Colorado. I've lived in Colorado for almost 7 years now and have spent my career increasing access to the outdoors for youth from traditionally excluded communities. So I'm really excited to be in this role now with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, helping shepherd forward the new Outdoor Equity Grant Program. And before my role at CPW, I actually worked with Teresa at the Continental Divide Trail Coalition, working with gateway communities along the Continental Divide Trail to help engage them in the stewardship and just using the trail. And before that, I worked for the Forest Service in Leadville, Colorado, doing bilingual conservation education for youth and school groups. Really happy to be here and excited for this conversation.
Thanks so much, Andrea. And finally, Armando Quintero.
There, I'm unmuted now. Armando Quintero, my pronouns are he, him. And as a child, my family did not go to parks. I'm the oldest of 8 kids. I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. And for me, the outdoors and the wild places of the world were something that were in my imagination. And it was National Geographic and black and white television programs like Flipper that really sparked my interest in my future of getting out into the out of doors. I ended up working as a national park ranger for a long time. I actually worked in Latin America with a volunteer group doing vaccination programs right out of high school for 3 summers, and just became immersed in the world that I dreamt about, which was scuba diving, going to Mayan ruins, and spent 22 years as a ranger. Then I took 10 years to be a home dad, where I also explored other passions that I had. And that turned into my running for political office and helping to run a water district, and got recruited to work at a university, UC Merced, and did both of those things for 12 years. But have always had my fingers as an adult in the out of doors equity, without really calling it equity, but that's really what the core values were. And I have been in this role, which is one of the greatest privileges of my life, next to being a dad. And I've been in this role for 3.5 years, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Yeah. It's wonderful to have all of you here. I feel like an incredible community of practitioners, but also co-conspirators with us. So the first question we'd like to maybe hear from all of you on is just tell us about your state fund and how it was created and how the funding for the grant program you have in your state has evolved over time. And maybe we'll go backwards. We'll start with Armando.
You want me to speak backwards? No, actually, with California State Parks, the legislature created bond programs way back in the late 60s that were the genesis of community investments and community investments managed by parks that were not in state parks. And so since 1968 or so, there have been various bonds, Proposition 1, Proposition 68, and others that have directed funds to park poor communities that were disadvantaged with disadvantaged populations across California. And since 1968, there have been over 8,000 communities that have had investments managed by state parks to do things like buy open space, build recreation facilities, playgrounds, parks and playing fields. So it's been sort of in the ethic of this department ever since then. The Outdoor Equity Grants Program itself, that was formally named, that wasn't created formally until just a few years ago. It was proposed in 2019 and went into effect in 2021. And but it actually, just really quickly, over the years, there was a lot of experience that informed how we manage those outdoor equity programs. And our teams, we have actually there's over 60 employees in the parks grants programs, but we also have 3 other divisions that have grant programs that are similar: the off-highway vehicle program, the boating and waterways program, and the State Historic Preservation Office, which are all in the department. So collectively, I am still trying to gather all the information to really be able to educate our legislators on how many investments have been made in their districts by these 4 various sets of grants programs, because that's one of the most important things we can do. Legislators don't realize that your offices are managing these investments that benefit their constituents. And that was one of the first things that I did when I came into this office 3.5 years ago. I was stunned. Literally, of all the legislators that I spoke to, and I'll stop with this, there were only 2 that were aware that it was state parks that had been directing tens of millions of dollars to their districts. And one example is there was a state senator who I know, and he said, well, I only have a couple of state parks in my district. And I said, well, in the last 10 years, there's been over $60 million worth of investments in your communities. Let me tell you what they are. So make sure you tell the world what you're doing. I'll stop there.
Thank you. And okay, how about we go to Andrea?
Yeah, I was hoping that Karina would go before me because it kind of helps piece all the puzzle together. But um, the Outdoor Equity Fund, and Karina will talk more about this, I'm sure, in New Mexico, was kind of created in 2019. And here in Colorado, there's a group called Next 100 Colorado, which is working to ensure that the parks and public lands in the state of Colorado reflect the faces of the people who live in Colorado. And they really looked at the Outdoor Equity Fund and the amazing work that was happening in New Mexico, our neighbors, and thought about how could we bring a similar program, bring similar benefits to youth in Colorado who aren't experiencing the great outdoors in our state, a state where we see millions and millions of visitors coming every year to hike the mountains, to go to raft down the rivers, to ski, to do all of these amazing outdoor recreation opportunities that we have in Colorado, but just aren't available for everyone to access. So the wheels kind of started turning in 2020, the year of the pandemic, of course. So there was a lot of online organizing happening. I'm really looking to New Mexico and trying to understand what was happening with their Outdoor Equity Fund and how we could adapt it here. The program in Colorado was passed or was advocated for by Next 100 and about a coalition of about like 60 organizations who were doing outdoor education, environmental education, and youth services across the state who really like came to the Colorado legislature and advocated for the program. It was signed into law in 2021, and then we got up and running like early 2022 and have gone through 3 full grant cycles, and we're in the middle of our 4th. So I'm still pretty new here in Colorado, but lots of awesome work happening.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Karina, about hearing from you.
Thank you. Yeah, so we like to celebrate that Outdoor Equity Fund was first of its kind here in New Mexico. In 2019, legislation was passed to create the Office of Outdoor Recreation, and what was unique about that legislation, it included the establishment of the Outdoor Equity Fund within the legislation. And the purpose of the initiative was to promote outdoor experiences and educational programs for youth, ensuring that these opportunities are accessible to all, regardless of socioeconomic status. And there were some requirements in the legislation which I think are interesting and maybe different versus other states, I suppose. One of the key requirements in the legislation is that at least 40% of the youth participating in these programs that we fund come from low-income backgrounds. And then another requirement in the legislation is an environmental education component, so that ensuring that participants engage in programming that addresses topics such as climate impact and wildfire prevention. So we really address the barriers to access, and I think how it's evolved as we've so far granted over $5.7 million to nearly 250 programs, which we, tracking the data, have introduced more than 72,000 young New Mexicans to the outdoors since the first grant round in 2020. And so it's been fantastic, and a lot of energy from the community, grassroots community that started the initiative. So yeah, and as far as evolving, just this past weekend in Denver at an outdoor summit, people coming up to me and recognizing that New Mexico was the first ones and wanting the information to see how they can do it in their own state. Minnesota is actually looking at an outdoor equity fund right now. So it's really interesting to be in it, how it's evolved so much, and how other states are looking to us to just take this from coast to coast.
Yeah, and that's actually a beautiful segue, because I think, I mean, that is part of the reason we wanted to have this panel was to sort of talk about what is the need on a local level, state level, and then also how do we sort of take that up a notch and take it into the federal space so that every state, whether they're organized or not, has that opportunity, because it is such a powerful thing. And I think all three of you talked about, you know, one of the benefits of the way these funds work is they're working at a different level than traditional outdoor engagement. And part of that is because they bring in the whole cultural component, because a lot of these kids, you know, work within their different, they utilize different networks to sort of experience the outdoors. It's through their church, it's through their community, it's through different spaces. And I wondered if you can talk about the, you know, sort of what you've seen or the benefits of these kinds of approaches where they're bringing in food and crafts and heritage, music, culture into these programs, and how that maybe from your observation in the spaces that you sit, how that has benefited maybe or planted seeds for longer term experiences for these kids when the funds maybe aren't directly given to them, kind of space. And I'll let any of you go.
I can jump in. So the legislation that created the Outdoor Equity Grant Program in Colorado also created a board made up of people who are coming from the communities that are served by the Colorado program. So that's racially and ethnically diverse youth, low-income youth, Native youth, and Native and American Indian youth, youth with disabilities, and LGBTQ plus youth. So it's really ensuring that like the people who are closest, most closely affected to the barriers in experiencing the outdoors are kind of making the decisions about where grant funding goes. And it's something that's becoming more and more common in Colorado, but this was really one of the first governmental boards that had that decision-making power to distribute $3 million annually, which is amazing. So one thing that has been really important and forefront to the Outdoor Equity Grant Board is understanding that cultural competency in programming is really important to make sure that youth are feeling welcomed, included, and safe in these outdoor spaces and can bring them their full selves to the outdoors. So we really look at it as like when we ask for grant applications, we're really asking communities to explain to us what being outdoors looks like to them and why that's relevant to the youth that they're working with, rather than kind of deciding, well, like we're only going to fund skiing programs because in Colorado, skiing is like the pinnacle of outdoor recreation that you can do. So we fund all different types of programs. Definitely skiing is in there, but also understanding how communities might need to build up in their familiarity with the outdoors, or how they might take things from being outside that's very different from like the predominant outdoor culture, especially here in Colorado, which can be very intense and very, yeah, let's just leave it at that, intense.
I can jump in. One of the things that I wanted to share is that it's a little different than I think what Colorado does is when we evaluate our grants during grant cycles, we actually ask for volunteers in the community that represent all parts of the state. And whether they've been a recipient in the past or work with educators or children or tribal governments, we have a different representation of the committee every time we have a round to evaluate. So it gives us different perspective and different ideas about how we're supporting these different programs. And definitely goes on. Outdoor recreation is such a interesting word to define, and I think it's so different in different communities and in different states. And we have outdoor learning spaces that talk about acequias and the cultural significance of the historical lands in our communities. Which maybe other states don't have, but that's an integral part of what we're supporting. So I think those cultural components are really important, but I really love that how we go about our evaluation, because I think that really helps moving things forward. And embracing more programming and more creativity within the programs that we fund.
I think that both of you have talked about really the diversity of opportunity, really demanding a diversity of approaches. And there's a couple things in California that we've been doing for some time. One of them, and I'm not sure if you all do this, is called the Statewide Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan, or SCORP. I think we all do that. So we work with a number of agencies in California, and I participated in the most recent refresh of that program to get a sense of what everybody's seeing in terms of public service and the public lands that the public enjoys. But one of the things that all of our teams do who manage grants is, and we make this very clear to everyone, that if you're interested in a grant, contact our office, because as we all know, the communities in need don't have the capacity to put together competitive grant applications. So our teams and our grant offices will help applicants put together their grant application and make sure that they're ringing the bells that'll get them, really competitive for those funding. And we also work, with tribes and communities across California. And what we also do with the outdoor equity grants here is we integrate them into existing investments that state parks has made. So for example, we have a program called Family Camp. And what that is we've got a number of trailers around California that have everything you need to go to camping. And our teams will go out and provide free trainings to anybody who's interested in utilizing those camping, all that camping gear. And so what we also do with our outdoor equity grants here is we provide training for adults who are working with kids from these communities, so that they can be from the community and understanding what it is that the kids want and need, and know how to work with those communities and really getting out into the outdoors. And as you know, we have funded programs with outdoor activity projects in California with, state parks manages 340 miles of coastline. There's a lot of surfing that happens here. So like there's an organization called Brown Girl Surf. And so we provide, free access to those sorts of groups, to these places. So it's a real variety of investments that just make these places possible. And also it's led to other programs. And I'm just going to hold one up. A couple of years ago, as we were talking how to improve access, we actually created this, and working with our state librarian, it's called the Parks Library Pass. And in California right now, all you need is a library card and you can get a free pass to go to state parks with you and your family. And it's kids that are doing this. So the kids become like the trip leaders. And so many benefits have occurred that we didn't expect or think about. And one of them, just to give this as an example, is librarians have reported that number one, it's the most checked out item in state libraries right now. Another is that families are coming in and checking out books and discovering libraries as a place to go gain knowledge and free books. I mean, it's just sort of like this magical thing. This, because of our budget situation in California right now, that we have to find alternative funding for. But what we really do is try to connect the outdoor equity grants to the various programs where there's additional support and opportunities that can really expand that experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you touched on some things I know we're going to get to in a little bit, which is some of these other kinds of barriers for just the access to the application and that process, which we'll talk about. But I think you bring up a really unique thing that I think will help us talk about sort of some learned lessons and pitfalls that through the years that you guys all have administered your programs. Like, what are the things you've learned and what are the improvements you've made to ensure that these funds are getting out there? And, sort of what would that guidance be for those places like Minnesota who are trying to develop their programs? And I also just want to mention, I think it's fascinating that all of you talk about sort of how you're decentering the traditions of the past to sort of reimagine the future. And I think that's a really powerful thing around just talking about libraries. Libraries are so important to small, in particular rural communities, but even urban communities, because it's free. Libraries are such an underutilized point of access. So whether it's a gear library or access to park passes, or just that being the center, like that to me is what's powerful about the Outdoor Equity Fund, is it utilizes these other mechanisms to get young people outdoors through networks that traditionally haven't been thought of as the avenue to the outdoors.
You know, what you're saying, what you're saying and really making me think is that access is about equity is about access to the world.
Yeah.
And these are the doorways that we're utilizing to do that. And so it's really, it's actually a really emotional thing, you know,
Oh, I think it's incredibly powerful. And I think that's what's so powerful about all these funds is the work is, you know, it's absolutely phenomenal that we have 3 states across the United States that have taken this approach to, and I think that's why we're so inspired on a national level to think about this on a national scale, that there is this really, it's a complete deconstruction, but it's of sort of how we've gotten outdoors, or what we think of just like the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. Amazing programs, but that's not the only way. And so I think it is like the creativity also that all of you talked about, and the innovation. That is also what's so powerful about this, is it really brings it down to sort of a very achievable pathway to getting outdoors, and it can start small and grow from there. And so I do wonder, like, for all of you to think about, like, what have you learned, and like how has your program shifted since you've been with it, and how, you know, what are the things you're still trying to think about, the innovations you can continue to improve upon, understanding that you've already sort of shifted the space. And so now what? How does that like help you?
I wanted to say, can I say one thing really quickly? Because my first year in the role, there was a combination of funding that came together, and our grants office sent me a package of, you know, you have won, and sorry, but you didn't make it. And this isn't a surreal number. And I had no idea about these programs before I came into this role. It was a package that was going to announce, no joke, $548 million of community investments. And I said to our grant administrator, I am not going to sign these letters. I need to do something before we do that. Contacted the governor's office and the Secretary of Resources office, and we agreed. And what we did is we did a public rollout on Zoom for all the recipients. So they were all on camera. And these were averaged $8 million a grant. But these were for park board communities that had nothing. And the governor and first partner congratulated everybody. The secretary talked about these grants and what they mean for these park board communities. And then I said a few things, but then I said, let's go right to testimonials. And for the next hour, these communities gave testimonials. Todos nos pusimos a llorar, everybody. You know, and at one point, I was sitting next to the Secretary of Resources, and I had a little yellow sticky pad, and I wrote on a yellow sticky, "This is like Field of Dreams." And I handed him the yellow sticky, and he held the yellow sticky up to the camera, and he said, "Director Quintero says this is like Field of Dreams," and the screen blew up. I mean, the people were like dancing. And the thing that was, so many things that were unexpected. And the thing that several things happened, and I'll stop with this. The news stories from across California filled everybody's weekly news files for several weeks, including the governor's office, all good news stories. And what was beautiful is the stories talked about how these were programs supported by the public, authorized by the legislature, signed off by the governor, and then the state agency delivered back to the public what they wanted. You know, and so as the governor said, he goes like, this is good government, and teaching people about that. So there was that. And then the other thing is that the legislators became aware of this and of these programs in a much deeper way. And I'll tell you, for the last 2 years, the legislators are just incredibly engaged in the work, overall work that we're doing. But anyway, I'll stop there. But it's really an opportunity to really engage the public, to engage the people that support us in our roles, the voters, the legislators, and the executive leadership of the states where we work.
Yeah, I can follow up on some of the things that we've learned. But in following up with about the storytelling, we've heard over and over again that legislators want to hear the stories from the youth or from the educators. And the thing that's most profound when you're talking about the equity fund are not the stats, but they are the stories. And there's so many of them, and most of them make me cry, so I don't usually talk about them. But they are wonderful. They are really feel good. But what we do for the Outdoor Equity Fund is once or twice a year, we gather the awardees and ask them for feedback on the process, on their experience and how we can be better at the whole process, because we know that if you have experience with grants on a federal level or any other agency, sometimes they can be really, really challenging and very rigid, very difficult. Sometimes you have to hire somebody just to understand what they're trying to say. So the Outdoor Equity Fund with New Mexico, very simple, very easy, very digestible. And when we got the feedback through the years, we've altered a lot of the things based on that feedback. Some of that was doubling the amount of the award. We increased the award range because we were hearing from the grantees that I think it was 20,000 was what we were providing at the high level. That wasn't enough to deal with some of the barriers of transportation, for example, for programs in rural communities where transportation is such a challenge, or tribal communities. We also heard that match requirements were really challenging. So in order to lower some of the barriers, programs serving BIPOC youth, rural communities, tribal communities no longer have a match. So things like that are those changes that we have, even if they're small changes or big changes, they come directly from our grantees, listening to them and us being able to communicate effectively. We're really they're able to talk to us, text, call, or email very easily and have those conversations. And I think that's really been a great learning process, and just being aware or letting people know too that we are accessible. So if there is something that we can do to make things easier, and I'll keep saying we're addressing the barriers to access, because that's really what we're doing when we're trying to get them the money to these programs to support youth, to get them outside.
Yeah, I think I did want to touch on kind of those partnerships and maybe non-traditional ways that youth are getting into the outdoors. I think we've really seen kind of two types of applicants. There's applicants who have been around for a while, really have it dialed with like the outdoor access piece, and have been working with youth in the outdoors for many, many years. And maybe they're expanding their programs to reach more of those traditionally excluded communities that they haven't reached before. And then on the other hand, we have a lot of applicants who have tons of experience working with the particular community that they are serving, but maybe going into the outdoors is new for their types of programming. So we've funded programs that work with refugees. We've funded programs that work with LGBTQ plus youth who are unhoused, who are kind of like using the outdoors as a vehicle for healing and kind of that social and emotional growth. We've funded programs that work with youth who have some family member, parent who has been incarcerated, and they're using the outdoors as a place for healing. Those are just a few examples off the top of my head, but for these organizations that are really new to going into the outdoors, we've realized that we have to provide another level of support, which is really helping their staff and their organization understand, like, okay, what is it that we need to do to keep youth safe when they're in the outdoors? Even like, what can we do in the outdoors in Colorado? What opportunities are out there? And we're really lucky that this grant program is housed within Colorado Parks and Wildlife because CPW has so many really free opportunities for organizations to take advantage of, whether that's hunting or fishing, wildlife viewing, like learning about ecosystems and the environment, so many things that we can provide, but we've had to be that connector to help organizations understand, like, okay, what are the state parks? What can we go do there? What are the rules? So it's been really nice to help spread that information. And another thing that we've done is we've started hosting quarterly communities of practice where all of our grant recipients can come together over Zoom. Sometimes we do events in person as well, just to help people connect. And we kind of present different topics. So we've talked about hunting programs, fishing opportunities. We'll probably talk about boating and boating safety here coming up. And then organizations who have received grants can come on to those communities of practice, learn from maybe a CPW staff member who has like this other completely different program unrelated to the Outdoor Equity Grant program that has resources that they can access. And then we offer opportunities for grant recipients to then chat with one another and really like learn, like, okay, we're experiencing barriers with transportation, and that's a huge challenge for us. Like, what is a charter bus company that you use that will like take kids to national parks? Or like, how have you approached this different problem? Or like, what are you doing in your program that's funded by the OEGP that we can kind of like replicate? So I think that's been a really amazing learning experience for all of us to just grow and learn together and really see outdoor access as like a web across the whole state of Colorado, and how we can support one another through those opportunities to meet one another and just learn what everybody else is doing.
I have so many thoughts. That's not about me. However, I'm hearing from all of you, like, I think this shifting of the narrative about the outdoors and the avenues, and I love this concept that it's good government, because I think so often on such a local level, it's hard to see how government is benefit. It's like a hard tangible to sort of really realize on a local level. And I think it is a powerful avenue. And I think it's also one of the things I know we think about on the national level is like those workforce development pathways and those opportunities for Andrea, like the concept of the faces reflecting the faces of our country that are outdoors. So whether it's in the workforce that's managing the parks and the forests, or leading the river trips, or teaching the woofer classes, that we're looking like the people that we really represent. And I think that's the other component about outdoor equity that I think is so important, is we're starting to plant those seeds. And I wonder, from your perspective, sitting in your offices, like, what do you think about that seed planting, and how are we going to continue to generate this sort of next wave of folks who are going to come into your positions, or to the parks that you manage, or the opportunities that are out there just to be in the outdoors and get people outside? And what are your hopes for that space? Because I think that's part of this as well. Yeah, go for it, Armando.
You know, as I said earlier, I didn't go to parks as a kid. And frankly, my experience in working in parks was one of a lot of expectations about what I knew and didn't know and what I had experienced. And it was embarrassing, you know. And so when I got into this position, and what has guided me since the first moment that I started thinking about this, is I treat everyone the way I wish I had been treated since I was a child. And I think, and that means seeing people, you know, and I think that it's really a profound thing. And I know you've all experienced it. You're talking to a young person or somebody who sort of knows something, and they're like, I can't believe you're talking to me, you know, because we are in a way the untouchable in the reverse, right? And I think seeing and acknowledging each other. Also, you know, this work is about, you know, treating our colleagues on this planet as fellow humans, and what it means to be. This is a word that I hope doesn't create reaction, but a citizen, and not a citizen of, but a citizen of the world, right? So this is an owner. In fact, next week, we're gonna have State Parks Week. And one thing we need to look at is the taglines and the language in our organizations. And I've been looking at our department a lot around that. And I'm asking that we change it actively and maybe change it so that it's not, a new stamp of a phrase. So for example, State Parks Week, the tagline is, "This is where you live." And I really want us to be communicating to the people that we work with that this is home, whether you're on the coast or don't ever get to the coast, but you see pictures of the coast. This is where you live, and so I think that there are opportunities for really taking advantage of what you have both mentioned, Andrea and Karina, that the non-traditional ways of connecting with folks also offers, for example, with the Parks Pass, the library pass, so many people who responded, and there's a QR code on our passes so people can take a survey. So many of them did not know how much it costs to get into a park and had ideas that it was going to be a Disneyland price to take their family of 4 to a park, and were shocked that it was like, this is cheaper than fast food, so you see what I mean? It's creating what we do in this work, I think, is really create true ownership of the public for these incredible places that we share. So I'll stop there. Oh, you're muted, Karina.
Yeah, so I guess I would touch on when I'm hearing you say is ask about workforce pathways and that kind of thing. What I've noticed with the programs that we're funding, that we're supporting, and as they evolve, and there's more and more program that we're funding, is that there's different types. There's the kind of I don't want to say one-off, but you take kids and they experience something for a day on a field trip. Then there's the programs that are like 2 weeks long that are really significant and transformative, a little longer, richer, deeper into whether it's the science or biology or culture aspects of the program. And then there's that third one, which I'm really excited about. And it's really teaching youth how to be leaders in whatever it is that is connected to the outdoors. Could be a fly fishing guide. It could be, a state parks person, whatever. But all these things, they're more semester long or year long programs. And I was part of a fish-a-thon, and I'm a new fly fisher person. We supported a program of just that, providing youth the opportunity to become fly fishing guides. And there was only one girl that signed up, mostly boys. And so I connected with her to be her fly fish-a-thon partner, and she was guiding me. She was taking what she learned in this program. She had only been in it for 10 weeks, and I felt comfortable. I don't know if it was because she was a girl, and it was just a more comfortable feeling. And I was so proud to know that we were providing support for future stewards of our lands and water, but also future leaders of our outdoor recreation industry. So I think the Outdoor Equity Fund does just that. Just in investing in our youth, we're investing in our leaders, and to look differently than what we may have known them to look in the past, because they're more diverse. So that to me is really exciting. Trail building, things like that, that you see that you can utilize for the future. So I think we're just tapping into the potential of those programs.
Awesome. I'm going to be mindful of time. So we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to briefly touch on sort of this idea of, we've talked a little bit about it, and then I also want to leave some room for some of the questions that are in the chat, which is, but first, just talking about the review process or the application process. We've talked a little bit about it, and it is a lot about, for all the 3 programs, reducing those barriers. So it's exciting to hear that California provides support for people applying. I know, Andrea, in your program, there's that entry level letter, and then there's a lot of discussion. So it's a non-traditional way to get access. And Karina, as somebody who's been funded through the Outdoor Equity Fund, the process is relatively easy, but there's still portals, and you have to have access to the technology, and there's for all of them, right? So there's still some barriers, and I wonder if you could talk about the process and things that you're thinking about continuing to reduce some of those barriers, or for anyone wanting to apply, like, you talked a little bit about the review process, but just sort of the funds that are available, like actually, what's the likelihood of being funded? Because then I think that's the other piece, is like, there's all this funding out there, but what if you get the no? And so what happens after that? And that was a lot.
Is that for me? That one's for me.
For any of you, actually, but we can start with you. Yeah.
Okay. I'll be quick. We do still have some work to do on the accessibility part, because we use an online program. So I think that's a room for opportunity there to help that out. We are grateful and concerned. We did move $3.7 million just this year, and that was American Rescue Act, ARPA funding, American Rescue Plan Act. And unfortunately, that money has run out, but we have the Land of Enchantment Legacy Fund that was put into place last year, and it was funded so that we're able to get recurring fund every year, and it's around $450,000, I think, which is obviously nowhere near the 3.7 that we were able to give away this year. We didn't have to turn anyone away, and now we're going to have to. So we're having to tell people it's become competitive, and it also puts us in a position where we're going to have to fundraise again, go to legislators, tell those stories, try to get that funding to a place where we think it meets the demands of our state. And that can be a real challenge, because as you're doing a great job and marketing everybody's stories and how significant this is, you're also going to get more demand. So it's just a lot of work that we're doing, and I'm constantly letting people know this coming year is going to be a very competitive year, and we're going to do our best to get more funding, and everyone is just going to have to, I don't know, we'll see. I don't know. It sucks. Basically.
I think that educating the public about, or the applicants about, how the process works and what can happen going forward. We're in a terrible situation right now in California, where this last year the legislature had said, well, you have $106 million for the Outdoor Equity Grants Program. And we did two calls for applications. In the first call, we awarded $56 million worth of grants. The second call, we were getting ready to make the selections, and because of our budget problems in California, all the money got frozen. So we're paused right now while we wait to see what the legislature does. But I do think that part of what you're saying, Karina, is really communicating with the applicants and keeping them in the loop, and that this year is not the only chance. There's and to keep them informed and in the loop of what's going forward. But the other thing is that the legislation in California regarding the outdoor equity grants is that we can get donations and put them in that fund. And we have not done that yet. But this is a year where we learned that we have to, because we need to figure out how to smooth out the dips. And so that's a really painful moment right now for all of us here.
Yeah, 56 million is still amazing, though. That's huge.
Yeah, well, yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah, but so much need is out there, and I think that's probably what all of us see. In Colorado, we thankfully have dedicated funding from the lottery, and that's created in statute that created this program. So we've been ramping up, and this year is the first year we'll be able to distribute the full $3 million disbursement from the lotteries. So that's really exciting. But at the same time, we've seen our applications and requests go up and up every year as well. So it's always a balance. And I think we're really lucky in Colorado that there's been such an amazing response to this, and a lot of advocacy around this program and energy around it and excitement for it. So the folks in government and the governor know about this program and how much support it has. So I think we're in a really good place to continue showing the impact and continue showing the need. So that's exciting, but certainly last year we received $17 million in requests, and we were able to fund $2.4 million for projects. So definitely way more need out there than we have available. So it's definitely an uphill battle to just continue to prove what a huge impact this program is having and the need that's out there. And then as far as support for applicants, right now I'm kind of a one-person program, so that can be challenging, especially with the amount of applications that we receive, over 200 a year. But we really do our best to provide feedback to applicants. We also have a webinar where they can come and ask questions to the board, and we really try to guide folks through the process as much as possible. And I think overall, we've been able to provide that assistance for folks who reach out and ask for it. So if anyone in the Zoom room is in Colorado and wants to apply, but hasn't done it yet or doesn't know how to start, just emailing me is a good place to start. And we try to help as much as we can to make sure that it's accessible for folks.
Yeah, and I think there's some really powerful messages. And I know when Colorado's fund was developed, there was a lot of learning from New Mexico and California of how to like institutionalize that funding stream so it was more consistent. But I also think, you know, Armando, you brought it up early, and we've all touched on the importance of storytelling and educating legislators of the impact. You know, in the world I work in the National Trail System, we talk a lot about our ROI. And like the one place that it's really working well when you have volunteerism and all this stuff, and you can demonstrate the public benefit and the public support. And I think that there is some messaging that collectively we all need to be doing together to really uplift and show like, what a powerful direct service to, I don't want to use the word citizens, but community members and people on the ground that are actually benefiting from this in ways that we haven't even begun to see yet, because we're so early in this long journey of outdoor equity. What, you know, I would love to know, like in 10 years, when we look back at some of this more sort of like institutionalized funding, what the impact is, you know, and following up with some of the participants and asking like, where did you end up? How did this influence you? Where are you today? And thinking about that. And I think as a collective, we need to be thinking about that as a larger community of organizations and advocates, and even in the outdoor future spaces, of trying to understand what does the data tell us and how can we leverage that to keep the pressure on legislators and funders, whether it's on the national level, local level, state level, to demonstrate the good that this is providing to our community members, our constituents, and the people that we serve. And I think it's such a powerful thing. And we could probably talk about that, you know, for a long time, because we never have enough time to do that either, because we're all in it, doing the work, and that's hard as well. But I want to make sure we have just a few questions. There are a couple of questions coming in the chat, and I'm looking at some of them, and I one of the questions is similar to like, you know, has anybody calculated how much money would be needed to fulfill all the qualifying applications? And I think that's one of those pieces too, of what's the need and what's the gap, you know, what's the availability and what's the gap, and how do we figure that out? And then there's another question around that maybe you all can respond to. Somebody's curious about the other side of the coin, I think, where organizations that are strong in the outdoor recreation side, but not on reaching underrepresented communities, what type of support programs are there to leverage their connections and or growth in this space? As we've talked a lot about those programs that are really serving those traditionally excluded communities, but you know, what do those other networks look like, or thoughts on that?
Oh, very quickly, I think there's a lot of work to be done on our part in terms of thinking about the language we use and also the ideas that we have, because there's a tendency in parks to be talking to the public and thinking, don't you want to be a park ranger? Don't you want to be doing what we're doing? When in fact, I think the experiences should be informing somebody so that they know that they can love these places and then become a legislator. They can become a businessman. And we need the support from all of those areas And so I think that if we think about our audience as being an entire world of both government and private sector people, I think it can change the way we, you know, say, don't you want to be a park ranger like that? You know, so. And it is about capacity, right? I mean, it ends up being the political and fiscal support that's needed to serve everyone.
Well, and that's an interesting question. It just, because another question that came in around those same things and Andrea, you sort of alluded to this, is the staffing that is required to manage these programs. And each of you is somewhat different, but I'm not sure what your staff looks like compared to the demand on your needs to respond. And so maybe that's another place too, to think about how we actually provide better service, and or what does your staffing look like, and what are those barriers for you all?
I'll respond to something Armando said because I think like I have a similar story to him. I grew up in Texas. My family went to state parks, but I don't think I truly understood like maybe I knew about park rangers and things like that, but I didn't understand the extent to what kinds of jobs were available in the outdoors. And I think that's one of the things I've really tried to impart in working with youth throughout my career is like, yeah, you can be a park ranger, you can be a wildlife biologist, but you can also be an accountant and work for state parks. You can do policy, you can do so many different types of things, and really like all of those people are needed to make it all work together. So I think we really need to break out of that mentality of like, well, if you're outdoorsy, you're going to be a park ranger or a biologist, and like that's how you contribute, because that's not true. And stepping into like federal agencies and state agencies, you really understand like, oh, there's all different types of people with all different strengths who love the outdoors, and they're contributing in different ways. So I think that's a really important message, and just wanted to call that out. And then I forgot the other question, but yeah, for staffing so far, it's me, and then of course all of the support people like within the agency who are helping manage those contracts and procurement, and I won't get into all of that, but there's a lot of other supports around me. But as far as program management, it's myself, and then I've been able to hire a temporary person who works half of her time on this program to help out. But there are also additional challenges with like working within state government and getting full-time staffing. So we don't have time for that today.
Well, with Land and Water Conservation Fund, we did request that they put administrative costs into what they're granting, and we did get, I think they are doing that now. So I think it's important to include that. You're right.
Yeah, we're starting to see that as well. We're a small staff. We have pretty much one person that administers the Outdoor Equity Fund. She's fantastic, but she's also wearing a lot of different hats. So when, learning that if we get money that we're asking help, part of a line item that says help for the admin work, because it really is a lot. So, but if you're passionate about it, there is that energy behind, figuring out how to get the money to the people and the programs that need it the most.
And very quickly, it's everything at once. It's considering new grants, it's managing existing grants, and then continuing in some cases for years to work with these program folks. So it's a lot of staff support.
Well, and then I would just say like the consistency of having each of you in those roles and be in those roles and be able to stay in those roles, because relationships, as we all know, are really critical to those internal workings and just how you can lead within your programs and within the state systems that you work within, especially when it comes to contracts and procurements and agreements and all the things. Oh my gosh, oh yeah, we all know it's so that's the hardest part of the lift is probably the administrative stuff that no one sees behind kind of closed doors. And so I would say one that I'm really grateful that all three of you are in the positions you're in, because it's obvious the passion and the care that you bring and the thoughtfulness that you bring to these positions and to the programs that you administer. And I think that also is part of their success, is that there's really humans behind the programs that are helping connect to other humans. And we're thinking human level. We're not thinking about, a widget or how many people are out there, but we're thinking about experiences and people who are really the impact that we're hopefully shaping in that one kid who might decide to become the next, director. Like, I think I want to do that. I mean, there are the folks out there. So I just want to thank each of you for being who you are and bringing that uniqueness to the roles that you're in, because it definitely is important for these places to, again, in that shift of how we do work. And I think it's powerful. And as we come to sort of the close of our hour, I wonder if there's one or two pieces of advice you might give at those folks that are on the Zoom today, thinking about their own potential states or how they can, mobilize, or maybe they're already in Colorado, California, or New Mexico. What advice would you give to someone starting an outdoor opportunity in their state or in their community?
I'll go really quick. 2 words: community and data. The Community Outdoor Equity Fund would not be where it is if it wasn't for the community that got behind it, the grassroots community that insisted that this division was created with the OEF in the legislation. And they are my biggest advocates. So every day they're calling, what do you need from us? So community is really important if you're going to start this. And data, that's looking into the future, like you were talking about. I'd love to see multiple states with OEFs getting together and figuring out what does that data component look like, so we're all gathering the same data so that we can all be on the same page, comparing notes for future potential either if it's a big outdoor equity fund on a national level or state by state.
Elevate the communities we work with. And by that, I mean, acknowledge the people who are getting the grants and that it is about them. I have a tough time when I go to ribbon cuttings and all the electeds stand up and I'm giving you this. And in fact, I just love the idea and have tried to practice looking at the audience and just say, look at who you are. This is here because of you. It's your program. And I think we need to create a sense of ownership. No, we need to create real ownership. I'll leave it there.
I think that's really beautiful. And an additional piece of advice, kind of building on that community theme, is involve the youth voice. That's something that we've done in Colorado. We have 3 youth board members who help decide on grants. They're under the age of 25, so they're eligible to receive this funding. I would love to see more of a youth voice on this decision making in the future. So that's kind of like my little pet project.
I think that's powerful. Something I was just recently in a meeting and we were talking about the they, and I'm like, they are the youth. Why aren't they in this room? Why are we always talking about them? They need to be telling us what they need versus us assuming what we think they need. That's a whole other conversation, a whole other session. At any rate, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank everyone who participated. I was just going to mention that we have recorded this session. And so this will be available on our Outdoor Futures website, Outdoor Future website. And there's also additional information. You can sign our letter of support. You can follow us for more updates and calls to action. You can, to Armando's point, donate so we can start building the funds we need to kind of do this on a national level. But then also check out each of these programs. I know there were a lot of questions around like specific status of California and some of the things happening in Colorado. I encourage you to reach out into those programs or reach out to us, and we'd love to put you in touch with the right people. And just thank everybody for being here. It is definitely a powerful space to be working in, and I'm really glad that we all get to do this work together. So thank you.